welcome to Mission Majjhima, Ajahn.
Ajahn.
So tell us about the Laṭukikopamasutta.
The Simile of the Quail is one of my sutta I quote very often, actually. It begins in the town of Apana, and a monk named Venerable Udayan goes to the Buddha and basically just expresses gratitude, saying, how many unwholesome things has the Blessed One helped us give up? How many wholesome things has he helped us take on? And specifically references how the Buddha had the Sangha of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis give up first the midday meal, then the evening meal, until they just ate before noon, basically. And in each case, Venerable Udayan, though he wasn't terribly happy about having to give up those other meals, because of his faith in the Blessed One, did so and eventually saw the benefit. And so just sort of expresses this gratitude. The Buddha affirms what he's saying and then gives this amazing simile where he says, when one practitioner is admonished by me saying, give up this thing, that practitioner says, what, this, a mere trifle? And does not give it up. And for him, that fetter, that little thing becomes like a rotting creeper that would bind the foot of a quail. Even though it's a rotting creeper, it holds the quail still and stationary, paralyzing it and bringing it to disaster and destruction. Whereas another who hears from the Blessed One, give this up, and because of their faith does so, that no longer holds them back at all, even if it's a large fetter, like a bull elephant would snap a leather cord. So, a fascinating reflection on what are our rotting creepers that seem small from the outside, but are really holding the heart back. The Buddha then talks about 4 kinds of people, where he says, one practicing for the abandonment of the upadi, the what are called the substrates, acquisitions. Mm-hmm. These can, in the commentaries are defined as the aggregates, but elsewhere defined as pretty much anything we attach to. Maybe unwholesome states arise, attachments, and this person does not give them up. And such a one is called fettered. Or unwholesome states arise and the person does put forth effort to give them up, and such a one is also called fettered, because they haven't achieved enlightenment yet. The third kind of person, unwholesome states arise, their mindfulness is slow to arise, but when it does arise, it eliminates them quickly. The fourth is one who is liberated and has seen beyond all attachment to the upadi. So these 4 kinds of people. And finally, the Buddha talks about these 2 kinds of pleasure, this pleasure associated with the 5 kamaguna, the strings of sensuality, not to be associated, dangerous, leading to much suffering and despair, versus the pleasure and happiness associated with blissful states of jhana and meditation, which are to be associated with, not to be feared, and are part of the path. And finally talks about this ascension through these various refined meditative states, saying, if the Buddha, would teach even the abandonment of this most refined state, the base of the cessation of, or the base of neither perception nor non-perception, into the cessation of feeling and perception, this apex of concentrative state, what fetter would I not say to abandon? So, a brilliant exposition from the very bottom of the path, or the start of it, to the very end. Ajahn, what would you like to draw out of this discourse?
Yeah, just a few things. There are a number of really evocative phrases which we find in here, specifically about how someone who's abandoned something, in a monastic form at least, but I think the wording does translate to even non-monastics, but having abandoned certain things, acquisitions, or really anything we're holding on to, one lives at ease, unruffled, subsisting on others' gifts, with a mind as aloof as a wild deer. And living in some of our forest monasteries where there are deer, they do run free, and they can sleep anywhere and can just roam free, go any way they wish. So that freedom is being pointed to. That's really beautiful. The upadis that you brought up, these acquisitions, the commentaries, some of them actually talk about 4 different types of upadi acquisition, of which the complete removal of all acquisitions is a synonym for nibbana. But the 4 types are, you've got the khandupadi, which is the acquisition of the 5 khandhas, kilesupadi, the acquisition as the defilement, the abhisankara upadi, which is acquisitions as the formations, so thoughts and other formations of that nature, and kamupadi, or the acquisitions of the sensual pleasure, sensual gratification. And I think just to go a little bit more into that refining of the definition of sensual pleasure, the type of pleasures that one associates with, and those which one doesn't. So later on we'll come to a sutta on non-conflict, Majjhima 139, I believe, where the Buddha says you should know how to define pleasure, sukha, and having known how to define it, you should pursue pleasure, you should pursue sukha internally. So there are these 5 chords of sensuality, which are wished for, desirable, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire, and provocative of lust, which are related to sight, sound, smells, taste, touch. And here, so this is the type of pleasure which most people live for. This is the American dream in certain ways, is to just get all these and then you'll be fully happy. But the Buddha says, actually, bhayatabba, these could translate as to be feared. Or another meaning of bhaya is just to be wary. So you should be wary of these because they're the things you can get addicted to and obsessed with, in which when there is a higher pleasure, which the Buddha points to, this internal pleasure, these are really limiting. It's a very low bar of the capacity of a human heart. So actually, being wary of these pleasures, they're not to be associated with, not to be developed, not to be cultivated, but actually to be made wary of. And the Buddha actually calls them a filthy pleasure, literally a pleasure of excreta, milha sukha, but also an anarya sukha, an ignoble pleasure, the pleasure of patujjanas or unenlightened people, versus the type of internal pleasure which we should pursue is the nekama sukha. The Bhikkhu Bodhi translates sukha here rather than as pleasure, which he did for the types of pleasure we shouldn't associate with. We have the bliss, the sukha of the bliss of renunciation, the paviveka sukha, the bliss of seclusion, the upasama sukha, the bliss of peace, and the sambodhi sukha, the bliss of enlightenment or awakening. And these are the type of pleasures, happiness, bliss, which we actually should associate with. These are the flavors of the 4 jhanas and ultimately of enlightenment. So we should know how to define pleasure and should pursue that pleasure internally. So those are just a few things to draw, but I'd be curious, Ajahn, is there anything else that you'd like to draw out?
I loved how you pointed to the kinds of pleasure, and you'll hear in some meditation circles like, beware of getting addicted to jhana. And I think, many teachers have made the point, like, we're addicted to pleasure one way or the other. I mean, we need pleasure as beings. And much better this blameless bliss. And, down the road, one can worry about addiction or not to it or letting go of it. But in Digha Nikaya 29, the longer length discourses, the Buddha says, if other mendicants say, you are addicted to jhana, you should say, yes, we are addicted to jhana. The 4 jhanas are the kinds of pleasure which are blameless, which lead towards liberation. So he's very clear about the beauty of these states, actually, and it's a path of pleasure. And I love those flavors you laid out. The other thing to note, I really appreciate and want to just emphasize that quail simile. Not only does the Buddha says one who, sort of is unwilling to give up something after the Blessed One has told them to, by saying, the Blessed One is far too exacting, nitpicky. This person shows ingratitude, disrespect, discourtesy towards the teacher and towards their companions desirous of training. And just a sense of like, one way we show our gratitude to the Buddha who's given us so much is to trust him on these things a bit and be willing to give up, or to those, our spiritual companions. And, also just that there's things that look very small on the outside, maybe, a little, a glass of wine, whatever it is, but that actually you sense are really binding your heart. We all have these little creeping vines that are actually holding us back far more than you might think. Should I drink? Should I not? Should I have a glass of wine? How should I do it? Like, this isn't an issue for us monks, we don't drink, but we all know that flavor. And just so what are the rotting creepers that we can just cut out of respect and love for the Blessed One? And just the final thing being those, I forgot to mention the different people, the poor man that can't go forth because he's attached to even his kind of less refined things, or the rich man who is attached to less of those things.
Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
It is upadi. It means substrate, support, acquisition, the substrate for rebirths. It comes from the root da, which means to place, and upa, which means near, so to place near.